Good morning. Welcome to our conference for our clients about the Davies and Associates clients concerning the Grenada and E-2 immigration options for the United States. I would just give some overall comments and then I'll introduce the panelists we have. So first of all, we've seen a big increase in demand and interest in the E-2 Grenada option. A lot of clients are following that route at the moment. We get a lot of questions, a lot of inquiries. What we'll discuss in this topic is a little bit more information about Grenada and how that process works. And then about, for the clients who wish to obtain an E-2, how that works and how some of our clients are residing in the United States on that. With that said, I'm Mark Davies. I'm the chairman of Davies and Associates. We have offices around the world. We have clients who are pursuing this program, E-2 Grenada, especially in India and Vietnam. One of the close partners we have in the process is to obtain Grenadian citizenship, which we'll talk about, is through partial investment or partial ownership in projects in Grenada. I'm very glad that Mariam from Range is with us, I think probably from Dubai this morning. So Mariam, perhaps you could just introduce yourself a little bit and perhaps a word about what Range does and how Range can help clients. You're mute. Mariam, you're mute.
Thank you, Mark, and big thanks to DNA for having us on this webinar with them. I'm Mariam Mansouri and I represent Range Development. I am one of their senior business development directors. And we started this business in around 2011, 2012. We are hotel developers. So we're not agents in the middle or anything along those lines. We develop our own hotel properties in the Caribbean. And all of them are sold through citizenship by investment. Our first project, our flagship project, was the Park Hyatt Hotel in the island of St. Kitts and Nevis. This hotel was delivered in 2017. And our second property is in the island of Commonwealth Dominica, which was delivered in 2019. And they're both award-winning hotels. They've won awards from the likes of Forbes, People Magazine, New York Times, and Condé Nast, and CNN Travel. We're very proud of them. And we're very proud to say that we are the only hotel developers that have delivered a 5-star project in the Caribbean under citizenship by investment. So around a year ago,
when you say 5-star, you mean a 5-star hotel, Mariam?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, when you say 5-star, you mean a 5-star hotel, correct?
Yes. So we have 2 5-star resorts under our belt, the Park Hyatt and the Kempinski. So when we stepped into the island of Grenada, it was around this time last year, where we were approached by the government, and we had some deep discussions with them in regards to pricing, the period it took to get citizenship and the processing, and all of that has been digitalized since then. And the price has also been reduced. So there's certain projects. Grenada was at $350,000. It is the best Caribbean program out there because it gives you the global mobility that all the other islands give you, which is great. And we've seen global mobility has become so much more of a need rather than a want during these COVID times, because people have realized that if they had, visa-free access to a lot of different countries other than the one that they're living in, they could have passed the past few months in maybe a different or better way, or closer to friends and family that they would have chosen to. So global mobility is there with all the Caribbean citizenships, which is visa-free access to around 140 countries, including the UK, all of Europe, Hong Kong, Singapore, Russia. In addition to that, Grenada has China visa-free, which is quite important to a lot of entrepreneurs, especially our Indian clientele who do a lot of business with China. And the E-2. So the E-2 is what makes the Grenadian program really unique in its own right, and it is the gateway to the United States. But I'll let Verdi and Mark discuss the E-2 with you guys, as they are our E-2 lawyer experts.
Thanks, Mariam. We'll come back to you in a moment with a couple of questions. But first of all, let me introduce my colleague Verdi, who's here with me in Charlotte, North Carolina. which are firm's latest geography we're working on. So Verdi, you run our, perhaps you could describe yourself and what you do and talk about maybe a couple of the clients who we have living in America on E2s who've been through the Grenada program.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's joining this webinar, wherever you are in the world. As Mark was saying, I am a senior attorney at Davis & Associates, and I head the E2 visa practice team of the firm. We've assisted foreign nationals who are not citizens of treaty countries to obtain Grenada passport to enable them to apply for the E2 visa. So as you probably all know, the E2 visa has a lot of advantages for entrepreneurs and business owners. So for most clients, like for instance, for Indian nationals who prefer to apply for the E2 visa, obviously you'd have to go through the Grenada Citizenship by Investment program. And yes, I can confirm that we have actually assisted Indian nationals in obtaining the passport and in applying for the E2 visa. So these clients are already here in the US, they're developing and directing their E2 businesses, and they have basically the flexibility to work here, and their spouses and children are also able to join them. The spouse is actually able to apply for employment authorization document to allow him or her to work for any US employer, and the children are also allowed to study either in the public school system or the private school system in the US.
Bertie, what is the maximum duration of an E2 visa?
The duration of the visa is dependent on the reciprocity schedule with the US. If you are applying with the Grenada passport based on the reciprocity schedule, you can potentially get up to a maximum period of 5 years. But you have to understand that the visa is different from the status. So while you may have—
Hold on, Bertie. When you say 5 years, it means after 5 years, I'm done. I just have to leave America. That's it. Finished?
Not necessarily, because if you enter on a valid visa, you're still given a period of 2 years of authorized stay. So for instance, you enter—
But can I renew the visa, or is it just over?
Yes, the E2 visa is renewable indefinitely.
Oh, so that means I could be on my E2 for the rest of my life, potentially?
Yes, you can be.
Okay, so that's not like an L visa, which has a maximum duration of 7 years in L1A, correct?
That's correct.
You can't renew it more than 7 years. So I guess an advantage of an E2 is I can have my E2 forever, whereas perhaps other US non-immigrant visas have a limited duration.
That's right.
Okay, I think that's a key and helpful thing. So before we come back to Mariam, just one other question, with just a very popular question. If I have an E2 visa, can I transition that to a green card? One of the things that clients ask very commonly is, so on an L1 visa, I can automatically turn that into a green card, and with an E2 visa, I can't. Is that correct, Verdi, or are they, what's the situation?
That is incorrect. It's actually one of the myths that you'd probably read on the internet, but it's also possible to transition to EB1C from E2 on the assumption that, but it should be on the assumption that you still meet the requirements under the EB1C category. So if you are able to demonstrate that you have a foreign qualifying entity and that you have qualifying employment prior to your entry to the US on the E2 visa, there is a way to transition to EB1C.
I see. So there's no difference really between the options that are available to me on an H1, an L1, or an E2. I can use all the same ways to get to a green card. Is that true?
Yes, that's
okay,
correct.
Thanks. So my next question for you, Verdi, is why do I need Grenada? You mentioned sort of people do Grenada. Why don't I just apply for an E2 visa? Why do I need Grenada?
Sure. The first requirement that you have to meet to be able to apply for the visa is that you must be a citizen or national of a treaty country. And not all countries have treaties with the United States. So for instance, India is not a treaty country. So for Indian nationals who are looking to explore the E2 option, the first step obviously would be to obtain a passport from a treaty country like Grenada.
Gotcha. Okay. I guess just one more question so this all makes sense. So what is an E2 visa, buddy? What does an E2 visa entitle me to do in America?
The E2 visa is a non-immigrant visa. It allows you to come to the US, to live and work in the US, to develop and direct your E2 company. Basically, to qualify for the E2 visa, it requires you to set up a company in the US and prove that you're making or you're in the process of making a substantial investment into the E2 company. And if you're applying as a treaty investor, then you basically be in the US to develop and direct that E2 company.
Okay, so I guess with an E2 visa, what you're saying is I can open, operate a business essentially, and that I can do that for the rest of my life. And there are options that.
That's correct. First, I think there's a lag, Mark. For some reason, your video is frozen.
Oh, am I still frozen?
Not anymore, I think.
Okay, all right. So as I said, I guess an E2 visa in business in America, and to be in America potentially, and then I have on that visa, and then I also have the ability to change it into a green card if I want to.
Sure.
Hello? Okay,
Yes,
and what is the minimum investment for an E2?
The treaty only states that the investment should be substantial. In general, we typically recommend an investment of no less than $100,000. That seems to be the unofficial ballpark figure, but obviously that would depend on the nature and the type of business. So as you probably would all know, certain types of businesses would probably require more investment. Like for instance, if you're going to consulting, then obviously you don't need that much capital as compared to a real estate related E2 company.
Okay, lots of questions. Mariam, now I understand why I need to go through Grenada if I want E2. What are the options for going through Grenada? How does Grenada work? How does the process work? I know you've done helped lots and lots of clients, so perhaps you can just give us an overview of the process.
Sure. In full transparency, Mark, there are two ways to obtain a Grenadian citizenship, and this is by the law of the country of Grenada. One is through the donation option, where people donate their money, and there's X amount, depending on the family size, there's a donation amount as well as certain government fees. The second option is the investment route. So the investment route has become more popular over the past 5-6 years. And we will take credit for that partially because prior to Range coming along, not just in Grenada, in the Caribbean, these projects would never get delivered. And then after the first bunch never got delivered, the clients decided, you know what, I might as well just donate my money and get it over with and move on with life and get my second citizenship. Now with the Park Hyatt and the Kempinski, and in Grenada, we have signed up with the sixth census. So it's the sixth census that is under construction currently. Clients have realized that by doing an investment through obviously someone that has done this before and has a good reputation for it, they are able to make their money back, or at least their investment amount back. Government fees go to the government. And, Mark, we all know no government gives you back their government fees. But smaller size families, usually single applicants, do opt for a donation option. And when they are the way that it's structured is if you're a family, it just makes more sense for you to do the investment. And the investment amount is pegged by the government. So a lot of people ask me, if real estate goes up, what if it goes down? That is irrelevant because in order to obtain a second citizenship, you have to invest $220,000. Common question that comes out of India is, could I buy a piece of land for $220,000? Can I buy an apartment for that amount? The answer is unfortunately no, because in order to obtain second citizenship, you have to invest $220,000 in a government approved project. And hotels are government approved projects simply because, you know, they create jobs for the people in that country. They do contribute to the GDP. It helps with the tourism and so on and so forth. So in terms of pricing, it is fixed by the government. In terms of projects, it has to be an approved project. We process our clients' applications. We handhold them through the whole, you know, process together. I know you and your firm do that as well, and we do rely on you for that with your clients. However, the highlight is it takes 3 to 4 months to obtain your Grenadian citizenship without needing to travel or reside in the island. So hence why a lot of entrepreneurs, again, decide to go for this option for 2 reasons. One, it's a lot faster than anything else that's out there. And at the same time, the fact that they don't need to leave their businesses currently, at least until they sort their E-2 out, is a huge winning factor. They can do it while they're at home, in whatever their home country is, and it's an online process.
That's right. So thanks. So just to emphasize something you just said, you told us it's taking 3 to 4 months. So from the time that I apply, I can expect to get a Grenada passport 3 or 4 months later. Is that accurate?
From the time your file is submitted into the government. So you've processed so very many of these files, Mark. You know, it usually takes a client around 2 weeks to get their file together. However, we do have clients that have, you know, taken 6 months to get their file together. So it is from file submission, from when the file is ready. Then it's 3 to 4 months.
Right. So I get how much longer is it going to take me to get an E-2 visa?
You're the E-2 expert. I think that's on to you and Verdi.
Ready?
Sure. Preparing an E-2 application could take between 1 to 2 months, depending on the responsiveness of the clients, because obviously there is a list of documentation that we need to submit with the E-2 application. Once the application is filed with the embassy, it usually takes them a couple of weeks to review. And once they have reviewed the application, they will let you know when you can schedule your appointment. And once you appear for interview, at the end of the interview, you will be told, you will know whether or not the application is approved or denied. So if it's approved, then obviously they will take the passport and return it to you with a visa stamp in a couple of days. So you're probably looking at between 1 to 3 months, again, depending on how quickly you'll be able to provide the documentation relevant to the E-2 company.
So if I give Marion $220,000, right, plus whatever the government fees are, can I start work with you on my E-2?
Certainly. There's a lot of preparatory work involved in preparing in an E-2 visa application. So obviously we can immediately start working on setting the company, applying for employer identification number, opening bank accounts. These things can be done simultaneously with the Grenada passport application. But one thing to emphasize is that we want to make sure that the investment is made until after you obtain your Grenada passport.
Okay, got it, understood. So realistically, if it's 3 to 4 months for Grenada, then I could have my US E-2 visa sort of 4 to 5 months after I give Mariam my money. Is that right?
Right.
Okay, great. So Mariam, just thinking about how many people can be covered by this Grenada program. So one of the questions that's being asked is, you know, if I come to you and I give you my investment, which of my dependents can be covered by that, and who can claim a Grenada passport?
Great. The law in Grenada says that main applicant plus their dependents. Now, definition of dependents is as follows: spouse, children that are single, so never been married, up to the age of 30. So the file needs to be submitted into government when they're 29. and earlier in their 29 before they actually hit 30. And siblings that are not married, siblings of the main applicant, and their spouse as well, never been married, as well as parents on both sides.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
we have applications of, one investment with, 8 family members obtaining citizenship.
So Verdi, let's suppose I apply, listening to what Mariam just said, my brother-in-law, my brother gets a Grenada passport. My parents get a Grenada passport. My 2 25-year-old children get Grenada passports. Does that mean that everyone can share the same E-2 visa?
No. An E-2 treaty investor can obtain dependent visas only for the spouse and dependent children below 21. But other family members could still potentially qualify for an E-2 visa by applying independently as an E-2 investor or potentially as E-2 employees if they have or if they meet the necessary requirements.
Suppose let's say, for example, buy a gas station in America, right? And I apply for an E-2 visa. So from what you said, my younger child who's 18 is covered with his E-2, and my wife is covered with her E-2. That 25-year-old child is not. Suppose that at my gas station, I also start a Subway food franchise that employs a number of people. Could I set that up so that my older child owns that Subway and I own the same business, but I get different E-2 visas out of it, even though it might be 2 different companies? Could I do that?
Yes, you can.
So it's possible then for all those people that Mariam kindly got Grenada passports for to set up one sort of family business and just to structure it in a way that perhaps my parents, my older children and other people can potentially all share an E-2 visa leveraging the same business. Is that true?
Sure. One E-2 company could be structured in such a way that there are 2 treaty investors if we show that each of the treaty investors own at least 50-50 of the company. And then again, as I said, for other members of the family, they can apply independently. They can set up a separate E-2 company.
Right.
Or again, it's also possible to qualify as E-2 employees, as an executive manager or a specialized employee.
Right. As you know, I always give the example of like the small hotel where you've got a family, maybe one family member owns a Starbucks coffee franchise in it. Perhaps another one owns a company that provides staffing to the hotel. So you can see ways to take one family that through Grenada, through one investment, and then with essentially one business, it might be multiple companies, but one business in America where everyone obtains an E-2.
Right.
And then, of course, we've got the green card follow-on that we talked about. So, Mariam, this is a very hot topic right now, and there's a lot of interest in it. What would you say sort of the hot issues are in sort of Grenada and Grenada E-2 at the moment?
It's because prior to COVID, Mark, Grenada was solely looked at by countries like Vietnam and India for the E-2 visa. That was the highlight. That was the unique selling point. However, global mobility has become a factor that people are really starting to consider. Tax efficiencies is also starting to play an important role because as we see, someone's going to have to foot this COVID bill at some point or the other. And another highlight about Grenada that a lot of people may not be very familiar with is the St. George's University. So St. George's University in Grenada is a very well-known, well-reputable medical school that provides medical residents into the United States. Basically studying your medical degree in St. George's allows you to practice your medical residency in the US. This is quite an important factor for a lot of Indian clients. And that's something that Grenada really helps with and makes a difference. And as Range Developments, we have a tie-up with the university that offers them exclusive special rates as Range investors that decide to send their kids to school at St. George's. So 4 things: global mobility, tax efficiency, the E-2 visa, and the university.
supposing I don't want to do an E2. So we do still, going back years ago, it used to be that our law firm had, let's say, a presence in Bastia, which is the capital of St. Kitts. And we had some people doing St. Kitts. We haven't done a St. Kitts for several years right now. But people are starting to ask about St. Kitts again too. So could you perhaps explain the advantages and disadvantages of Grenada versus St. Kitts and other CBI programs?
Sure. When we started off with St. Kitts as well. St. Kitts has the oldest citizenship program in the Caribbean. They started this first and foremost before anybody else. Now, when we look at St. Kitts, Dominica, Grenada, they're all on par with each other in terms of pricing, more or less. So the price doesn't play a huge factor. There's St. Lucia, which is quite a bit more expensive. It's around $80,000 more expensive. So they don't really play a significant role as much as the other three islands. Donations are again allowed in all three islands. It's just the way the Caribbean is. However, when I have clients that come to us for real estate investment in St. Kitts or also Dominica, because the projects are sold out, we contact any of our private or previous clients that have done it and their 5 years has passed, and then we offer them the resale option. We do this quite often. It's around a couple of times a week now. So let's say, Mark, you had invested in Grenada, St. Kitts, or Dominica, doesn't matter. 5 years from today, you have an option to exit. So that's the advantage over the donation. If I decide to buy your share from you, you would make your money back. You would keep your citizenship for yourself and future generations. Me and my family would then also be able to apply for citizenship. So we see a lot of our clients recycle their investment, if that makes sense, because there is a limited number of them. So there's not that many. They are free to sell it via any immigration law firm, consultancy in the world. They're not tied to, exclusively doing it with us. But 9 out of 10 times we find that, Mark comes along and says, my brother also wants this. However, I've already done it. It's been 5 years. I just want to transfer my share to my brother's name, or I want to sell it to X, Y, and Z person. We take care of the processing and the transfer, and the new buyer gets the citizenship, and the initial buyer makes their money back.
So just thinking about what you were saying, and I'm buying real estate. So we actually have somebody who just approached us about St. Kitts, and they had bought a property, which was not through you, some random sort of potential building site somewhere. And they're having real difficulties now. Not with getting their St. Kitts passport, but with the sort of what they purchased, the asset that they purchased. So you can talk to us a little bit about how secure can I be in my investment in St. Kitts, Grenada, wherever it is? What due diligence can I conduct? And if I'm working with Rain, due diligence do you do on our behalf, on my behalf as an investor, to make sure? Hello?
I think I lost you a little bit over there, but yeah. So basically, Mark, you pointed that out really, really well. When someone goes and buys a random apartment on an island, which is, all the way on the other side of the world, it becomes a little bit problematic when you want to offload and make your investment back. However, when you're part of a hotel establishment, which is, a brand and well-known and everyone's familiar with it, so you're talking about Park Hyatt, you're talking about Kempinski, you're talking about Six Senses. The advantage to that is the resale is so much easier because one, it's a well-known property. Second, 5 years into it, the property is already delivering an ROI. It's there. It's managed on your behalf by a 5-star brand. You get audited reports on an annual basis. You get your ROI. You don't have to worry about maintenance, managing the property, something somewhere broke, getting it fixed. All of this is done by the 5-star brand. So in St. Kitts, Park Hyatt takes care of all of these things. So it makes it that much easier for someone to want to exit because the buyer is going to be like, I'm not going to manage an apartment or a random piece of land on the other side of the world. Bear in mind, 9 out of 10 of our clients don't actually want to go live in the Caribbean. That's not the main purpose of this, right? I live in Dubai, and to manage my own properties in Dubai takes up quite a bit of my time. It's exhausting. But when you are part of the hotel establishment, you don't have that problem. So the client of yours is, in essence, maybe competing with my previous clients, whereas my previous clients are like, listen, you know what, this is the hotel, these are the reports, these are the paperwork, here, you take it and you get on with it. Makes your life so much more easier than, finding something somewhere and getting a random apartment or a piece of land or whatever it is. Now, that's why we do that quite often. And it's part of our business now. We have a separate arm for that. Resale and exit.
Talking about resale and exit, there's several questions about ROI, return on investment.
Sure.
So obviously there's two phases. So I'll come to Verdi in a minute for ROI on E2s, but focusing on we probably should mention, the only CBI program there's two CBI programs that qualify for E2. One is Grenada and one is Turkey. There was Montenegro, but that's something that probably most people will be shelving at this point for various reasons. So the two realistic options are Grenada and Turkey, and St. Kitts doesn't have that E2 capability. So when generally people are looking at the Caribbean, they're looking at Grenada. So let's say I'm Grenada, I'm in a hotel. Is there a limit to how much I can sell my investment for? Like, do I get an interest payment? What does my ROI look like?
Sure. So a Grenada Six Senses client would look at, with 2 years of construction, within these 2 years, they are able to stay at any of our other properties in the Caribbean for free, 1 week a year, themselves and their family members that they've included in the application. This actually comes in quite handy for the E2 clientele, because when America becomes home, the Caribbean is a luxury hotspot for tourism for Americans. So they get to enjoy that in the meantime. Once it's ready, based on the hotel itself and their analysis, as well as our previous experiences with our other two hotels, they're looking at between 2 to 5% return on their investment. It's not huge. Again, we're extremely transparent with it.
When you say that return on investment, Mariam, I think what you mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're talking about effectively the interest that someone is getting while they hold the investment, not the resale value of the investment, but the interest you're going to be paying them while they hold the investment. Is that right, or am I wrong?
It's on the investment, and it's based on the performance of the hotel. So I'll give you an example. Even though we did open and launch the Kempinski in Dominica in November 2019, due to COVID, we had to shut it down in February 2020. So obviously for that time that the hotel is shut, there is no return on investment. However, these are special circumstances that we're living in with COVID. Based on the performance of the hotel, they will make their ROI. It's estimated to be between 2 to 5%. And also one thing to be said here, Mark, is every hotel development approved project is given a certain number of investors. So it's not like, Range Developments can sell the Six Senses to 50,000 people out there. We are limited to 575. And this is also by the government. This protects your ROI. It also protects you when it comes to your exit. You're not competing with 50,000 other people. You're competing with 574 other people that are like you. Your return on your investment is based on the hotel performance on rooms, spa, bars, restaurants, taxi service, because you are a partner in the entire resort and you're not limited to a room.
So I get sort of 2 to 5% while I hold the investment. But when I want to sell it, is there anything to stop me selling it to, say, Verdi for $300,000 instead of 220?
No, nothing. The minimum by the government is 220. This does protect you, Mark, because it makes sure that no one else kind of undercuts you as the first investor in that market. you would be able to sell it for a bit more, depending on, you know, I mean, a lot of our clients that are on this call today will be like, you know what, there's a property that's off plan, which is 220, but then there's a property that's ready for 280. You know, that's a choice that second buyer has to make. But to be very transparent with you, I mean, when people come and want to sell it for $500,000, that's not going to happen. It kind of has to be around the same ballpark of what's there. But then there's added value to, you know, a project that's up and running and has, you know, someone else managing it and so on and so forth.
But potentially the ROI I would make is the interest payment that you're talking about, plus whatever margin I manage to make, if I manage to make one, when I sell it to Verdi.
Yeah. I mean, when I talk to my clients, I tell everybody this is the citizenship by investment in the Caribbean is really based on capital preservation and not so much capital gains. Because, you know, one of your clients sitting out in Delhi is going to be like, what, 3%? I can make that, you know, and like this, where I am and in the country where I know how I'm doing business. So it is capital preservation as opposed to capital gains. Just to make that exit smooth and, you know, move on to the next and make your 220 back and be on your way.
I'm going to ask Verdi about E2 ROI right now, but I'm going to come back to you in a minute and ask you to compare Grenada and Turkey, because that's the sort of other option I think that's out there right now. So Verdi, so, you know, I've done the Grenada thing. Now I get my E2 business. What sort of return on investment can I expect?
Your ROI on the E2 investment would largely depend on how well your E2 company performs in the US. So, I mean, there's no guaranteed return on investment. You're basically putting all your funds at risk because that is the requirement of the US government. You have to show that the funds that you're investing in the E2 company are at risk. So essentially, the return would really depend largely on the performance of your E2 company. So you basically have control over how much you would get back on your investment.
So it just depends what business I choose, right? I can run any business I want to, and it depends how it performs.
Right, yeah. The E2 only requires that the E2 company should provide a service or sell a product. So I mean, there's really a lot of room to be creative. It's really up to you to decide as to what type of business you'll get into, but obviously you'd want to look at the business opportunities that would give you a good return, obviously.
Verdi, we've had a number of clients over the years who for E2 have bought, done up, sold, leased real estate, right? Can you describe to me how that can work? See, I've got $300,000. How can I leverage $300,000 into an E2 business sort of for buying properties and fixing them up? And I know we've done that for several clients. You've done that. How does that work? Because $300,000 for buying lots of properties and having an operating company doesn't sound like a lot to me. So, but I know you've done it. So how does that work?
Sure. So in general, investments in real estate properties wouldn't qualify you for an E2 visa. It's generally considered as passive investment, but you can structure your business in such a way that you meet the real and operating requirement under the E2 treaty. So if you set up property rehab company, you can acquire properties with $300,000 of investment, because there are areas in the United States where real estate properties could be really very low. So for instance, we had a client who's based in Detroit, and he acquired a lot of distressed properties in that area. Some properties are less than $10,000 or somewhere.
If you go on the real estate network right now, I can see lots of properties in Detroit, believe it or not, for $1,000, which is incredible, but it's there. If anyone goes on Zillow, which is the US real estate network, you'll see hundreds of properties in Detroit for $1,000. So if I do that, how do I turn that into an E2 business?
As I said, you can set up a property rehab company. You can renovate or remodel and resell it for profit. Or you can even fix them up, and then have an portfolio of properties which you can also rent out.
I guess there's two models right at the moment for E2. With this example, you can do it yourself. You can go on Zillow, you can find properties for $1,000 in Detroit, you can employ someone to do them up, and then you can rent the properties or resell them. Or there are a number of companies in the market right now who sort of do it for you and manage that process for you, correct? What would you see as the difference between those two things?
Sorry, can you?
So for example, right now, we're buying and selling of properties, yes? The business you're talking about. You can either do it yourself, find the properties yourself and engage someone to fix them up and find tenants and rent them out. Or there's people like our partner Paragon, right, who do it for you. Right. So how would you characterize the difference between those two options?
I mean, obviously, if you want to be hands-on with your business, and you'd obviously want to go with the first option. But if you feel like you need more support, or if you don't want to be that actively involved in the business, then obviously you'd go with the second option. So it really depends on how involved you want to be in the business. While the E-2 treaty requires the E-2 treaty investor to be actively involved in the direction and development of the business, there's still ways to structure it such that you can still get support from partners like Paragon.
So I can do basically the whole process myself, or I can go through a sort of a company that packages it and does it for me, right?
That's right.
Okay, all right. Perhaps you could just give us, I'm going to come back to you in a moment. I'm going to go back to Mariam. Just could you think about some examples of businesses that people have done for sort of different industries and things? So I'm going to come back to you in a minute. And then if you could just give us some of those examples and perhaps also touch on how people can change those to US green cards. So Mariam, I said, you know, a question that I think fair question that occurs to me. If I'm from a non-E2 country and I want to be in America fast, then looking at some of the questions, E2 is probably the fastest way to be in the United States quickly. We can talk about green cards and things in a bit. That's a different process. But if I want to be in America quickly with my own business, E2 is probably the fastest route. So the two options, if I'm not from an E2 country, are right now, I think, Grenada and Turkey. If you want to talk about Montenegro, Mariam, you're very welcome to as well, or anything else. But how would you sort of distinguish the options? Let's say I'm from Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. I come to you and I say, Mariam, I want to do it. Guide me as to which country I should go with.
We'll start off with Montenegro first because it's a shorter conversation. The program does not seem to be very stable. They're talking about, you know, scrapping it at the end of 2021. At the same time, Montenegro's E2 visa is not as good as Grenada and Turkey's. So it's a single entry visa. So that kind of, you know, we move along for that. No one's really interested to kind of go down this route. And Montenegro is more expensive, so it's not really value for money compared to Turkey and Grenada. Turkey and Grenada have the same E2. It's a 5-year, as you mentioned, unlimited number of renewals, so people can actually end up spending their entire lives on an E2 in the United States. But Turkey versus Grenada is a couple of things here. One, Grenada is a Commonwealth country. The Queen of England is their head of state. They are not politically inclined on any side or the other. They're extremely secular, which makes it a safer country to be from. A lot of people that if you're going to go down the path of getting a second citizenship, you would want to get one that's considerably better than the one you currently have and not just a little bit better. Turkey does not have global mobility, so they don't enjoy the visa-free access that Grenada has. I mean, with Grenada, you can stay in the UK for 6 months a year consecutively without needing a visa.
Which countries, just to compare the two, let's be very specific. If I have a Turkish passport, can I go to China visa-free?
No.
With
Grenada, you can.
Okay. How about Russia?
Visa-free. No, visa free with Grenada only. All of
Okay,
Schengen
and
Europe.
European Union, Schengen?
The
So on
European
visa free in
Union.
Schengen, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, because I keep losing you for a bit. So basically, it's 140 countries, the United Kingdom, all of Europe, Hong Kong, Singapore, Russia, and China being the main countries. And there's also a whole bunch in South America as well as Africa. Visa on arrival to the UAE as well. They have representation, they have a consulate here. So global mobility is one thing, the political situation is another thing. And thirdly, which people may not be aware of, the currency in Grenada is pegged to the US dollar. So you invest in dollars, and then when you exit or make your ROI, it's again, pegged to the dollar. Mm. Turkey does not enjoy that advantage. I mean, for the past year, we've seen the currency depreciate quite fast, and it's a bit scary. So in these three aspects, Grenada is a winner compared to Turkey, even if it's just for the E-2.
Gotcha. Okay. So one thing I note as a lawyer that's interesting, it's a point you just raised really, is the Commonwealth thing. So the court system in Grenada, I think you still have the ultimate court of appeal is in the UK, right? And it was curious to me, right? They've been independent for some time now. Why on earth would you do that? And a Grenadian lawyer explained that to me. They said, well, the reason we do it is because it keeps at least the appearance and the actuality of impartiality, because it makes it impossible for politics to control the Grenada court system. Would you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes total sense. I mean, you got to bear in mind, Mark, that these guys don't have an army, they don't have a navy, they are not involved in any of the world political agenda. They're quite small. Their GDP of the country is based on citizenship and tourism. Therefore, the hotels being so much more active and more important to them. They don't discriminate against any of their second citizenship or citizenship by investment people. The passport is the same. Certificate of naturalization is the same. The only difference between an economic citizen of Grenada and a born citizen of Grenada is that the economic citizen cannot run for prime minister office.
Oh, okay.
Not saying that clients would want to, but they can even vote. So if you become a Grenadian tomorrow, you can vote. There's no secular, kind of discrepancies between people, race, nationality. None of that is something that they take into consideration. They do due diligence based on that individual's background, on just their background.
Sure. Mariam, I can see on the list of attendees a couple of our clients I know quite well, and I know they're going to want to know, what is the status of construction of your project? Has it started? When's it started? Is it on schedule? And sort of where is the project right now in terms of the process?
So the land that we've acquired is ours. And when it comes to our clients that are interested and we take this offline, we can share with you certain documentation that shows the land ownership, the government approval paperwork, and so on and so forth. We have completed the design and we have started construction. We are in the very beginning stages. COVID has delayed us by 3 months approximately, but we will catch up on that once, because people don't realize that, building on a benign island is a lot harder, and then it becomes that much more harder when COVID hits. But having said that, when we were building the Kempinski in Dominica, the hurricane struck, and nevertheless we did deliver on time. So we're more or less on schedule. November 2022 is the date of delivery. The hotel will be ready earlier than that, so it will be ready in this summer 2022. However, every hotel would be launched in November in the Caribbean, because that's when high season starts. Again, experience from the past 2 hotels, you open up in the summer, the hotel runs on a loss for a month or 2 until, Christmas season and Thanksgiving, and then pick up. And November 22 is when we will be delivering.
I'm assuming, but I wouldn't, what the definition of assume is, that 2 to 5% you mentioned isn't going to come because there's no profits until the hotel actually opens and is operational. Is that true, or is that false?
Yes.
Or?
It's based on the performance of the hotel and based on the audited reports that clients will be receiving. However, during the next 2 years, they can use any of our other properties free of charge.
Oh, okay. So if I want to go to the Park Hyatt in St. Kitts, I can do so if I'm a, is there a maximum number of nights I can use for that program?
It's 7 nights, so it's
Oh,
only
God.
room included. But
I thought I
however,
could live in the
take,
Park Hyatt for the next year.
I mean, having said that, it's actually interesting that you brought that up. We had a client who is actually American. He wasn't our client. He was looking at, avoiding the global taxation or and getting a second citizenship. Right in the beginning of COVID, he moved to Park Hyatt. He stayed there for 6 months, preferential rates, because he decided that he wants to also get a second citizenship at the same time. So we will help our clients out that way at any point in time.
Gotcha. So, Verdi, back to you. I'm through Grenada again, over back to the E2. Can you give me some examples of sort of real businesses that people have done where they've really gotten E2 visas?
Sure. Examples would be a coffee shop, a specialty bakery, clothing manufacturing, consulting company, convenience store, fashion design company, franchise owner of a gas station, home renovations, net marketing company, management consulting company. So there's really a lot of options out there. It could be a restaurant, a retail shop, a trucking company.
Looks like you're reading our client list. Is that what you're doing right now? Reading a list. That's okay.
So.
Yeah, you've got to cheat. You're cheating, Verdi. You should be able to remember this. But some of those clients have indeed changed their E2 into a green card, right?
Yes.
Okay. So a technical question that somebody asked is comparing E2 plus Grenada to EB5. The question is, what is faster, Grenada citizenship plus E2 or the EB5? Well, I'll answer one initial question and then let you answer sort of the green card part is, with EB5, you're not going to be in the United States in 3 months, not 3-4 months, not happening. We can talk about how long that can take, but not possible in 3 or 4 months. It is with Grenada E2. So sometimes actually clients do both. They do Grenada plus E2 plus EB5, but assuming you're not doing that, Verdi, can you just sort of talk about the difference in timeline between Grenada plus E2 versus EB5?
Right. So if the goal is to be able to come to the US as soon as possible, then obviously the E2 is the better option. Since it's a non-immigrant visa, processing times are faster. There are no quota limitations. You don't really have to deal with priority dates like with EB5. So as we were explaining earlier, in a matter of months, you'd be able to, there's a huge potential for you to get the E2 visa to come to the US. And then once you're in the US, that will allow you to transition to green card either through EB1C or EB5. But yes, as you correctly mentioned, if you go through the EB5 program, it wouldn't get you to the US as soon as you would like.
Okay, all right. And EB5 now, depending where you're from, if you're Chinese, it could take you 17 years. There may be some legal reforms on this, but potentially take you 17 years to get your green card. E2 plus EB1C, what could be as fast as about 1.5 years, 2 years? Is that right, Bernie? To a green card. Yeah.
Yes, potentially.
So, EB5, if you're not from a retrogress company, there is something called the expedite option, which if people have questions about, I can answer questions. You could conceivably get your I-526 approved in 90 days, and then you'd be looking at up to probably another year to get the visa if you're outside the US. So EB5 is going to take longer, even under the sort of very fastest of possibilities in this program, which, as I said, is why some people couple it together. Just looking down at other questions. will getting a Grenada passport invalidate an existing EB5 application? So I guess with this, oh, I know who the client is. If I file an I-526 30, right, and I'm fed up with waiting for my I-526 and EB5 to be approved, can I go visit Mariam or her competitors and go through Grenada and E2, or am I stuck waiting?
A pending immigrant petition or an approved immigrant petition doesn't disqualify one from applying for an E2 visa. It's specifically stated in the Foreign Affairs Manual that a mere pending petition or an approved petition should not disqualify someone from qualifying. But primarily, since it's a non-immigrant visa, the officer would likely want to make sure that you have no intention of adjusting status and that your plan to be on the E2 is only on a temporary basis. So in fact, we have one client who is originally born, who was originally born in China. She eventually obtained Australian passport. She has an approved I-526 petition. But then obviously because of the wait, we had to look for options for her. So we recommended the E2 option because Australia is a treaty country. So right now she's back in the US. She's set up her E2 company. She's into fashion design. She's manufacturing clothing for specialty shops. And she's back in the US. She's able to develop and direct her E2 company while waiting for her priority date to be current.
I think a very common question, and the way I just see a lot of misinformation, bluntly, some of it from other lawyers about this, who say, you know, I've heard it said you absolutely cannot do E2 plus CP5. And we know this is just false from having approved cases, and the fact that it actually says it, we just referred to. I would say that if you're contemplating doing that, that is not something for someone who's not a specialist. So if you are contemplating doing both EB5 and E2 together, you need to speak to someone who's genuinely an expert and genuinely done it before. Of course, there are mistakes that can be made, but as Verdi said, you know, it can absolutely be done. Mariam, people are asking about taxes in Grenada. I know you spoke about this before, but you know, worth mentioning, we have clients from India who we haven't done the analysis, but there's a couple of chartered accountants in India who are pointing out that under the India-Grenada double taxation agreement, and there is such a thing, there are tax advantages to Indians. Just looking at our attendees, a lot of them are Indian, of doing Grenada citizenship and just stopping there, even whether you do US or not. So Mariam was the sort of Grenada expert here. Do you have any extra comments you can add about sort of tax efficiencies associated with Grenada?
Mark, I do suggest, I mean, I'm not a tax lawyer nor a tax expert. I do suggest that the clients discuss this with their CAs. However, in terms of just Grenada by itself, Grenada is quite tax efficient. So the law in Grenada says, unless you live in Grenada and earn an income in Grenada for more than 6 months a year, you do not pay taxes in Grenada. So a lot of clients are concerned about, you know, if I get the citizenship, will I also have to pay taxes there? Will they tax me on my income or my assets outside the country and so on and so forth? Will they tax me on the $220,000 that I have there? If they don't live there for more than 6 months a year, they're not taxed on their income inside Grenada. So that's just the part on the Grenada bit.
All right, a very specific question for somebody who's asking it again is, and you know, I'll ask both of you to talk to this. Mariam, there's a lot of Persians living in Dubai. So it's something that you might be familiar with and you're happy to talk about, but how does Grenada and some of these other programs treat Persians right now? Someone's asked a question here, and it's a question as a firm, I would say, we get, not every day, but very frequently. There's a lot of concern around that.
Sure. As a Persian myself.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that. I thought I'd let you say that.
As a Persian myself, unfortunately, due to the sanctions and the current situation that we're facing, Iranians are not allowed to apply for Grenadian citizenship. Majority of our Iranian clients, however, do opt for the Dominica citizenship option, which we do offer to them. There's no restrictions there. I think Grenada tries to keep their E-2 off, you know, a certain level and keep the integrity and go along with the whole international way that the things are going. E-2 at the end of the day is an American visa, and therefore they are American laws that are dictated there. And so our Iranian clientele choose to go for Dominica because they're not allowed to go for Grenada.
Got it. So Verdi, Iran is the one country that's had its E-2 treaty cancelled. What are the current immigration options realistically for an Iranian in the United States? Assuming it's not family-based.
Potentially the L1. I'm trying to think of, I'd have to look into the current regulations again. I mean, I don't know on the top of my head, but obviously for Iranians, it's really just the family-based options that where you can find certain exceptions. But yeah, as you correctly stated, the E-2 program was recently canceled. We'd have to wait and see whether or not the new administration would reverse that.
Okay. And then, you know, Trump and his visa bans with different countries, right? Where do we stand with that? Like, we've got a new administration obviously coming in. Where do you see the visa bans on some of these different countries?
The most recent bans are effective until the end of December of this year. So the proclamations state that it could be extended, but obviously we've heard the president-elect state that he will likely reverse most of the proclamations issued by President Trump on the ban on immigrant and non-immigrant visas.
Got it. Okay. All right. So in summary then, Mariam and Verdi, perhaps you could just give us your sort of summary thoughts on Grenada and sort of the US E2 option, and perhaps just, you know, summarize how you can help people who might be considering this. And then we've been going for over an hour now, so absent more questions coming in, we'll wrap it up. So Mariam, what sort of closing comments do you have on the sort of overall program and perhaps, you know, summarizing how you can help?
Thank you for that, Mark. When it comes to obtaining a second citizenship, regardless of which country it is, every client's needs are different and every client's requirements are different. Just as a client, make sure you do your due diligence, do your background research, look at the track records of whoever it is that you're dealing with, whether it's the country or the developer or whoever's processing your file. For example, when we start processing a client, we charge them initially a deposit for the real estate part, as well as the government fees. All these government fees are reflected on the government website. None of them are dictated by us. We don't make it up. And if that client gets rejected, we refund their deposit. So basically, as a developer, we sit on the same side as the client until that client obtains their approval. So make sure that, you know, once you start your citizenship journey, you started with somebody who has a reputation in the field, who has a track record in the field, that can provide you with the right documentation that says they are approved, what have they done in the past, and so on and so forth. A lot of clients ask me, can I speak to somebody else who's also done this? Yes, you can, because we have processed around 1,600 applications and given 4,000 second citizenships. But more important than speaking to somebody else is have a look at our documentation, ask for our government approval letters. All of that needs to be in place, because I always say getting a second citizenship, you either go for something that's foolproof and is going to take you all the way, or you don't and you wait until the right time comes along.
Okay. All right. I'll deal with this question and quickly pass to Verdi. The E2 investment amount does not vary by country. There is no minimum E2 investment amount. Generally, the guidance from the State Department is $100,000 worth of investment, but people have certainly done less than that. And I think Verdi's done as little as 60,000. I know of other lawyers who've even done less, but we would recommend that people stay to 100,000 investment for E2. And note that that doesn't have to be cash. So we, for example, had clients who have stocks of goods, and those stocks of goods are moved to America, and that can count as investment. Having answered that question, Verdi, perhaps you can give us your sort of summary thoughts and how you can help people on this.
Sure. As I've always believed that the E2 is a very good visa option. I've said previously that I think that it's the next best thing to getting a green card for a lot of reasons. Number one, very quick processing times, relatively less capital investment requirement. Funds can come from various sources, so you can even be very creative about it. It can be a gift from a friend or from a family member. You can include inventory, you can include other types of assets, you can include intellectual property to form part of the total investment. And basically, as an E2 treaty investor, you have control of your investment funds. And again, you have the ability to bring your dependents, your spouse and children below 21. Gives you flexibility to travel and potential tax advantages with careful tax planning. So I think it's really a good option to even if you're not a national of a treaty country, I mean, it's a good option to explore, especially if your goal is to be able to come to the US sooner rather than later. So definitely can assist you with this journey. We've assisted clients obtain the passport and then eventually obtain the E2 visa. So if there's any other questions, more specific questions, feel free to reach out to us. You have our contact information and we'd be glad to answer your questions. Thank you.
So with that, Verdi, I think we'll wrap things up. Thank you very much, Marion, and for joining us from Dubai. And thank you, Verdi,
for having me, Mark.
You're very welcome. And thank you, Verdi, for joining us from about one floor away from where I am in the same building. So, all right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Verdi. See you guys soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.